and dear speakers. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Welcome to the 5th NFDI InfraTalk. I'm starting today in English because our presentations will be given in English. So I just start in the language that we all will be hearing now for the upcoming presentations. It's a great pleasure to welcome two speakers that have a very high profile and give a talk on a topic which is really recent, really relevant, and potentially of very high impact. It's a great pleasure to welcome Iris Pigeot as well as Stephan Liebig. And they will give a talk on the social impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, how research data infrastructure can help. We all know that this is it's an important topic. Maybe you have experienced the first sunshine afternoons in the outside, and maybe you even experienced some first restaurant visits in the past days. But of course, we all know the pandemic isn't over, and we all know that there's still a way to go with respect to vaccination, with respect to better understanding of what the long-term effects are, and with respect of how can we deal with such pandemics in the future, maybe even in a better way. And of course, research data infrastructure can help answering maybe all of these questions in a better way. So I'm really looking forward to get a fruitful insight and to get a stimulating pitch. Professor Dr. Iris Pigeot is coordinator and spokespersons or co-spokespersons of the NFDI for Health Consortium, NFDI Consortium, together with Juliane Fluck from the ZBMed. She's also heading the task force COVID-19. And it is really fair to say that Iris very strategically and very early on put something on top of the NFDI Consortium, NFDI for Health, to face the challenges of the pandemic that is now running for over a year. So it was well ahead of its time, one could say. She's also the director of the Leibniz Institute for Prevention Research and Epidemiology, the BIPS, and as such, she's frequently contributing to questions like the ones we are addressing as of today. She has a high profile in research, many top publications, and today I think she's speaking about one of her core topics. The second talk will be given by Stephan Liebig, Professor Dr. Stephan Liebig. He is part of one of our NFDI consortia, one of our other NFDI consortia, which is the ConsortSWD. He is the chair of the working group Corona of the Rat für Sozial- und Wirtschaftsdaten, the Council of Social and Economic Research Data. And he's also head of the socioeconomic panel, the SUB at DW Berlin. So he's really deep into studies and investigating how our population is evolving and how politics and our research can contribute to answer big political and socioeconomic questions. He will give the second talk right after Iris. But now, please, Iris, the floor is yours. We are very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And I will try to share my screen, and I hope it will work. Can you see the slides?
Yeah, it works.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, but I can't move. That means something is wrong now. Now it works. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the great opportunity to present the task force COVID-19. The task force COVID-19 is, as already said by Jörg, a kind of additional use case of the National Research Data Infrastructure for Personal Health Data, the NFDI for Health. And this use case or this project is funded by the German Research Foundation. The duration of this project is just 3 years, and it is coordinated by my institute, the Leibniz Institute for Prevention Research and Epidemiology, BIPS. And just to give you a rough idea, what's our idea? We just started with the idea that we wanted to establish a nationwide information infrastructure for COVID-19 research, where the focus is beyond clinical patient data, but instead on consequences of the pandemic outbreak for public health. And you can see below that we just recently published, it will be published open access pretty soon, a paper on the NFDI for Health Task for COVID-19 in the Bundesgesundheitsblatt. And here you can see the participating institutions, and they all have very complementary expertise, as you can see also later in the talk. And they are all also members of the NFDI for Health. Now let's start with the different objectives that we would like to achieve. First of all, we would like to improve the fairness of COVID-19 research data collections. And for this purpose, we would like to build an inventory of German studies on COVID-19. And these studies should be from the field epidemiology, public health, and clinical trials. And here we would like to provide a centralized data catalog with search function to allow an improved access and to provide also measures for improved data exchange. And we will also go for uniform assessments of the data quality. The second bunch of objectives is related to the promotion of timely implementation of harmonized research related to COVID-19. And here we will develop guidelines, trainings, materials, and standards, for instance, for data management, survey instruments, and the use of routine data. We would also like to provide standardized analysis routines for data exploration, and I will show you an example later on, and services for at least partially automated analysis of medical image data. One other important objective is related to the record linkage of all the various COVID-19 data records that are here in Germany. I mean, perhaps you also noticed that there have been a lot of studies going on in Germany, but they haven't been interrelated, which also led to the fact that sometimes the same people were included in different studies. And to get now a full picture of the disease, it would of course be desirable to link these different data records of the same individual. However, since it was not asked for informed consent, it will be difficult, and we are looking for a concept for linking these various relevant data sources, and that could be data from hospital, outpatient prescription data, or from sequencing image data, or also social demographic and psychosocial data. And here we also need to include, of course, a data protection concept, and we will provide a template for informed consent that could be used in further studies then. The next part of objectives are related to the standardization of information to be collected for data publication. And this relates to publication guidelines for standardized publication of COVID-19 studies, but it also needs a metadata scheme for the collection, detection, and publication of these studies. And we will also use a collection of terminologies and develop a terminology service. We will establish a search portal for personal health data on COVID-19, and partly these already exist, but that could be still beta versions. We will implement search functionalities based on developed metadata standards and terminology. And what is also extremely important, we would like to support information extraction and text mining, where we enrich developed terminology resources with synonyms for an optimal use on the search portal for metadata annotations or text mining approaches. Now, let me give you some results, but I beg your pardon. It's an ongoing project. That means the results are still preliminary. And in addition, I haven't the time to go into detail. And partly, I even have not the expertise to go into detail. Now, let me first give you some information on the publication guidelines. A reference was to develop a beta data scheme for recording COVID-19 studies, and we are able to assign persistent identifier. And I think what is important, not only to the studies themselves, but also to study documents and instruments, because we do not only ask for the studies and the metadata on the studies, but also for all these study documents, such as study protocol, data dictionary, questionnaire templates, to give such information to other groups that would perhaps also like to set up a similar study. And we would also like to provide Creative Commons licenses to enable subsequent use of the content of our study hub. And you can see that different data types are really concerned, not only the metadata on the studies, but also the statistical analysis plan, for instance, or the data management plan. We prefer machine-readable formats, but we also accept human-readable formats. Our preferred English language is English, but we accept also German. And the responsibility for this field is taken over by the ZBMed, by the Information Center for Life Sciences. Now, regarding the text mining-based preprint viewer, which is also under the responsibility of the ZBMed, you can see that this is really advanced already. You can see the website and a publication that had been published just recently. And this preprint viewer allows an advanced search and provides filter functions for the abstracts. It provides a direct link to full texts. It also provides export functions for the retrieved results and integrates preprints from various document servers, as for instance, Archive, and it is updated on a daily basis. Then we worked on the data catalog of epidemiological survey instruments, as I already said, on COVID-19. And you can see here's a landing page, NFDI for Health COVID-19 questionnaires. And this website provides a semantic research functionality for selected COVID-19 survey instruments and item banks of relevance for the different type of studies, epidemiology or public health. And you can see here on the left side, a screenshot from the study page, and then a screenshot of the corresponding page of the instruments. And here, the lead is at the University Medicine Greifswald, the Institute for Community Medicine, with support of BIPS. Regarding the COVID-19 study hub, you can see also here a corresponding screenshot. We have provided advanced search and filter functions where you can search for the metadata of the studies, the instruments on the documents, but also you can search for questionnaire items of instruments. It means an item search is also possible. And that is also described in the paper, Facilitating Study and Item Level Browsing for Clinical and Epidemiological COVID-19 Studies, that had also been published most recently. Here we have a hierarchical display of the studies and the documents and instruments, and also a version management of the documents is possible. We integrate studies from registries, as for instance, clinicaltrials.gov, but we also searched ourselves in the internet and then contacted the various PIs whether they agree that their metadata are published on our website and whether they would also provide their study documents. And perhaps that is good news, because I think no one refused to at least provide the metadata of the study. And I think that is a good sign that perhaps we will manage to have a change in culture after a while. And this COVID-19 study hub is weekly updated. And again, the lead is by the ZBMed with support of BIPS. Now, regarding the study document catalog of COVID-19 study documents and instruments, you can see here two different examples. On the left-hand side, you see a study protocol that you can find on our website. And this study protocol is for a study just related to corona monitoring. And on the right-hand side, you see the field questionnaire of a study that has been conducted in children of immigrants. It was a longitudinal survey in 4 European countries. And here you can find the information on the German part. And for this, the HITS, the Heidelberg Institute for Theoretical Studies, has the lead. And then, of course, I said that we are looking for tools for data exploration, and the modeling group in Leipzig worked on the presentation of data via the Leipzig Health Atlas, a Shiny app. And here as an example, you see the incident cases, for instance, in Saxony. And here they also provide model predictions via regular bulletins. And here you can see the predictions of the spread of the B117 variant. And as I said before, the responsibility is in Leipzig. It's the Leipzig University. It is the Institute for Medical Informatics, Statistics, and Epidemiology. And now regarding interoperability, we of course face a major problem because we want to implement international standards, and we tried to map the metadata items with FHIR. However, in some cases, FHIR extensions were necessary. And as you can see from this small picture here, even in some cases, no mapping was possible. And currently, the mapping of SNOMED was conducted for eight instruments in OPAL/MICA. And The SNOMED was successfully implemented using the YAML format. And here you have two examples. On the one hand, the SHIP study, which has included an additional questionnaire on COVID-19, and this famous GECKO data set. And both were just mapped and then transferred to the OPAL/MICA test server in Greifswald. However, what we noticed is that the hierarchy and grammar of SNOMED cannot be implemented in the current MICA/OPAL format. That means that on the long run, this has to be adapted to allow an optimal implementation of international terminologies. And here the lead is taken by the Berlin Institute of Health at the Charité University Medicine, Berlin. Regarding record linkage, we first did an overview of the different linking approaches with and without unique identifiers. And I mean, you all know that in Germany, we are missing a unique identifier for medical research, which is, for instance, not the case in Denmark, which is considered as a data heaven. And these differences are a little bit surprising since we both have the European data protection regulation. Then what we also noticed is that for the different studies, different personal identifiers are used, and partly even none, which means that record linkage is precluded. There is a recommendation for the use of personal identifiers as part of the core data set that has been developed by the Medical Informatics Initiative, but there had also been published in recent years the Good Practice Data Linkage, which contains a lot of recommendations for linkage processes. And these GPDL are currently applied in studies like the narco health study, the SHIP study that I mentioned before in Greifswald, or the LIFE study in Leipzig. And the MII concept is completely in line with the GPDL. And you can see here that we still have to work on the privacy preserving rules, because each data linkage procedure, of course, has to make sure that the privacy of the participants is preserved. Here, several institutes have taken the responsibility, as you can see here, among others, the University Medical Center Göttingen, the Department of Medical Informatics, which is also involved in the Medical Informatics Initiative. Regarding computer tomography, CT, for COVID-19, there have been several recommendations, or for instance, a rapid advice guide by the WHO, a multinational consensus statement from the Fleischer Society, and there have been recommendations of the German Radiological Society for clinical application of chest imaging and structured CT reporting in the COVID-19 pandemic. And that was all with the ultimate goal to have an information gain regarding the probability of COVID-19, the severity of the disease, the staging, potential comorbidities, and differential diagnosis. And you can see here the figures of such a CT for COVID-19, and it would, of course, be really excellent to come to a clear conclusion based on these CT scans. And here, the Fraunhofer Institute for Digital Medicine, MEVIS, has taken the lead to provide an image analysis service for CT data that is based on artificial intelligence. And by this, they would like to increase the quality assurance in this field. They would like to provide automatic segmentation and a tool for calculating disease-specific core scores and an interactive viewing component. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you got a first impression of what we are doing in our additional NFDI for Health use case task force COVID-19. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Iris. Thank you very much for this very insightful talk, and thank you for your engagement with fighting the pandemic. And I think we are on the right track if we try to better establish record linkage. We all know that this is a tricky problem, but we also all know that we have now technical solutions in place that can really go a long way. And sometimes it's small solutions like assigning PIDs. But of course, this really brings the big picture together and allows us to conduct insights that we could not do before. I would like to open a quick question round. So in case you have direct questions, and I see here there's the first chat. That was just a thank you from Dirk. Thank you, Dirk. But if you have a first question maybe or a quick follow-up, please raise your hand or ask your question via the chat. Apart from that, we will also have time for discussions after the second talk. If this is not the case, then thanks again, Iris. We will come back to that after the talk of Stephan Liebig. And I very much welcome now Stephan Liebig, who will give the second presentation. As I introduced, he's part of the working group on COVID-19 at the Rat für Sozial- und Wirtschaftsdaten. He's actually a quite prominent member of the Rat für Sozial- und Wirtschaftsdaten, I might say. And also he's strongly engaged and heading the work of the socioeconomic panel, the SUP in Berlin. Therefore, he's kind of the boss of one of the largest German studies that is conducted on a frequent basis, and is also looking into things like COVID-19 and the pandemic. Stephan, it is really a pleasure to welcome you here. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for your kind invitation. Introduction. I want to report or introduce a project from the RAT-SWD, on the German Data Forum. And please, the second slide, please. Is that possible? Yeah. This is a project funded by the BMBF. And the origin of the project is that the COVID-19 pandemic posed a variety of social science questions, such as how the pandemic affects the economy, social inequalities, family life, or education. So, since March 2020, a number of research projects developed to empirically examine these socioeconomic implications of COVID-19 in order to obtain quality-assured insights into the social effects of the pandemic. It is crucial to share these preliminary data and results in both a timely and accurate manner. At the same time, the rapid pace of the disease and the ad hoc mobilization of resources may also create conditions for inaccurate or low quality data that is not useful for secondary use or data linkages. This would pose the risk of diminished scientific impact and also social value of the collected data. Therefore, quality assurance and an increasing awareness to share these data are needed. Starting in March 2020, the Office of the German Data Forum, RAT-SWD, has collected information of the upcoming studies on COVID-19. Drawing on this collection, the RAT-SWD initiated the BEST FDM project. The project addresses different areas. First, it monitors the social science research on COVID-19 in Germany by collecting studies which empirically examine the social implications of the pandemic. Second, it analyzes the studies. The project seeks to develop a standard questionnaire with socio-demographic and corona-related variables. And finally, in order to facilitate networking between social science researchers in social crisis, we plan to organize events such as workshops to bring researchers from different disciplines together, address central RDM topics in the context of social crisis, and elaborate recommendations for the social science community. The project BEST FDM, or in German, bessere Ergebnisse durch Interoperabilität und standardisiertes Forschungsdatenmanagement, is funded by the Federal Ministry of Education and Research. It was launched in December 2020 with a duration of 2 years, not 2 days, 2 years. And a working group of experts was established consisting of current and former members of the RAT-SWD who formulate the guidelines of the project and take a bridging function towards the scientific community. The working group is supported and coordinated by the RAT-SPD office, which is situated at the WZB, or the Wissenschaftszentrum Berlin, and also carries out the related task. How is the project situated within the NFDI? The RAT-SPD is an advisory council to the federal government on expanding and improving the research data infrastructure for the empirical social, behavioral, and economic science. It forms part of ConsortSWD within the NFDI. What we are doing is indeed collecting studies. So the main element of our project is indeed the collection of studies. Studies must prove scientific quality and a certain relevance for the social science community. We only collect studies which examine the German-speaking area. And we collect the studies through two channels. First, since March of last year, we have been actively monitoring the social science community in Germany with regard to new research initiatives, which explicitly related to the pandemic. We put a focus on the institutions which form part of the RAT-SPD network and the data centers accredited by the RAT-SPD, for example, GESES, DIW, IAB, IAB. Additionally, we use the newsletter of the Informationsdienst Wissenschaft to identify new projects and update it on existing ones, like publication of results. Second, once our collection became known in the community, several individual researchers began approaching the RAT-SPD to ask for inclusion of their projects in the database. So the main goal, or one of the goals of the project, is indeed the mapping of social science research on COVID-19. What we have up to now is that we have studies which cover a wide range of disciplines, research methods, and research designs. Regarding disciplines, nearly half of all studies are situated in the fields of social science, which includes sociology and political science, followed by economics and psychology. Some studies can be linked to educational and health science, and several projects cannot clearly be related to a certain field or are explicitly transdisciplinary. We do not collect studies in the natural and life science. Regarding research methods, the vast majority, 83% of studies are quantitative. 13% are using mixed methods, and only 4% are purely qualitative. Regarding research design, nearly half of the studies are selected upon surveys, which emerged especially at the beginning of the pandemic. The collection also covers a large number of more elaborated representative samples and special surveys in panel studies. 12% of projects build on other data than surveys such as individual interviews, web scraping, or laboratory data. The data of the studies has been collected between January 2020 and today. Some ad hoc surveys were accessible only for a few days, whereas others remained open over several months. Some panel studies include multiple survey waves, and as the graph shows, a high number of surveys were carried out in March and May 2020 during the first lockdown, and there's also another second peak in November 2020 until today. Since we are constantly collecting and updating more studies, this graph will definitely change over time. Out of the 162 studies which have published their results, 45 studies, 28%, made their data or survey instruments openly accessible or have explicitly indicated to do so in the future. 131 studies, or 81%, shared their results as open access publications, whereas not all have an open license. By this, we apply a rather broad understanding of open access, including open data, scientific use files, or also accessible questionnaires. Several larger projects from established institutions provide very careful design and openly accessible documentation of the results, questionnaires, and research data management choices that encourage secondary use of their data or data linkages. However, the awareness of the importance of sharing data could be enhanced, particularly among researchers in small ad hoc projects. Another task of the project concerns the analysis of the studies in terms of the measurement of instruments applied. We examined survey items in larger panel studies and some cross-sectional studies comparing socio-demographic variables such age, gender, or education, as well as variables which can be specifically related to the pandemic situation, such as infection with the coronavirus, well-being, life satisfaction, or vaccination willingness. The BEST FDM project works together with a measure T3M1 of ConsortSWD, which is situated at the Geses-Leibniz Institute for Social Sciences and focuses on the ex-ante and ex-post harmonization of data. The first analyses show that in general, the larger, well-institutionalized surveys make use of demographic standards and have, at least for some variables, a high degree of comparability, whereas some cross-sectional surveys and ad hoc created surveys tend to conceptualize variables and questions on their own, making harmonization more difficult. Regarding variables specifically related to COVID-19 or social crisis in general, both established and ad hoc studies show large differences. One of the aims of the project is therefore to develop a standard questionnaire which includes both socio-demographic and crisis-related variables, which both existing and new projects could include in their research design. This would improve the interoperability of data and allow to better compare and pool different surveys. There are additional topics which are key to the RAD-SWD which will be addressed with the duration of the project. First, which data infrastructure is needed for the current pandemic and future crises? How can research data management ensure quality assured and interoperable data and results? And is there a need for a central contact point for national and international exchange in order to be able to spontaneously interlink research projects in such crises? The working group will organize a workshop to discuss all these questions and elaborate concepts and necessary actions to facilitate an improved and more standardized research data management. Let me summing up. The following steps are planned for the project. First, update and expand the collection of studies in social science research on the COVID-19 pandemic, including information on content, research, data management, and contexts of the project. Develop a standard questionnaire with socio-demographic and corona-related variables. Organize events such as workshops to bring researchers from different disciplines together. Publish the developed recommendation in the RAD-SWD output series, and present the results on conferences to enhance the implementation and further discussion of these recommendations. Through these measures, we pursue the following objective: improve interoperability and standardized research data management, especially in global crises and societal changes, increase awareness of fair data, promote a cultural change towards data sharing, especially among smaller ad hoc projects, and enhance networking of social science research in social crisis or societal crisis by improving and strengthening the research data infrastructure in Germany and internationally. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions and remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephan, for this very nice overview and the introduction of ongoing and future activities. And I think that the two presentations in a row show the path to go. I mean, this is just so obvious. And I was a bit struck by the fact that only 22% of the data sets were made available as open access. Of course, we all know that there are many reasons for not making data publicly available in the very open sense. However, if I understood you correctly, this also meant they are not available at all via standardized processes such as research data, FDZs, Forschungsdatenzentren, research data centers. So they are just not made available. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is a main problem. And that, this is something we should really discuss and should be aware what's going on out there, so to say. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. That's my first comment. A waste of taxpayers' money would be my second comment.
Okay.
And I would have even stronger comments, obviously, because the potential is so big in creating a network of interlinked studies. And this is what IRIS is also working on. So I take the privilege to ask a second question. Are you aware of how advanced these studies are in comparison to what the COVID-19 task force did? I mean, is it also the case that they use PIDs for instruments and for these kinds of digital objects and their parts?
I mean, this is the experience we made is that this is a very heterogeneous field. Yeah. You have, on the one hand, very sophisticated studies which really follow the rules and the state of the art, and on the other side you have projects or data sets which are very poor in this sense. And I mean, this is exactly the idea behind the project, to have a more to have a project which is collecting, giving also the information, and give the researchers also a orientation on hand, to evaluate or to see what kind of data we have and what is the quality of this data in the sense of RDM. And so this is really this question you raised is really in the heart of the project, that we want to also to prepare for future events, and to be prepared if something like COVID-19, hopefully not, but will occur another time in the future. And so.
Okay, thank you. And I think we should dive now into a certain discussion. I see the first hands raised, but for the moderation, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Eva Lübke.
Yeah, thank you from my side as well. To both speakers, it was really highly relevant research, and it's always nice to have something which is really up to date and to see how what NFDI is doing is really contributing to society and to research. And there's the first question from you, Iris Pigeot-Kübler.
No, it is not just a question. It was just also an add-on to the question of Jörg, because I think we have made the same experience as just said by my colleague regarding the quality and harmonization of study instruments and data collected and study protocols. But what we really experienced was a great openness of people whom we contacted, and a lot of them really said, what a fantastic idea. I think it is necessary to collect everything to really harmonize it in the future. And what we would like to provide, although I think it is a kind of ultimate goal, we would like to have a kind of template, how to go on the next time in such a crisis, and what should we then collect, which data, which questionnaire should be used. And therefore, it is of course great to have this close interaction with KonsortSWD, because some of these social projects now collected health data. The health project also collects social data. And of course, it would be great to harmonize both of them. And at the end of the day, we get really a comprehensive picture of the etiology, risk factors, spread, prevention, or what else, of hopefully not COVID-21, but something like that. It might happen now in the future quite often due to globalization. And I think we need to be prepared. And therefore, in our view, it is important that, for instance, the Robert Koch Institute is also on board of our task force and on the end of the NFDI for Health, because it might be helpful to get the thing really spread out all over Germany.
That's great. I have remarks from Jörg, or questions from Jörg and from you, Stephan Liebig. In case you want to ask a question or you want to have a comment, please just type either your question or a W into the chat function. So this makes it easier for us to follow who's first and who wants to ask something and contribute to the discussion. Jörg, please.
Maybe I should come back to my waste of taxpayers' money, because this is quite harsh. Of course, the key statement is there's so much potential in opening up the data for reusage, and this is what I'm addressing with this. So my question maybe to both of you is, how can we even further incentivize this kind of making data fair and also making studies fair and the results fair? I know that the RAD-SWD has put so much effort into this, and we are progressing. I mean, there is progress. Not to make any bad words here, there's really strong progress even. However, in the course of the pandemic, it was very urgent to conduct a lot of studies at the same time in parallel, and maybe do it just as you could, as fast as possible. I mean, this is all agreeable. However, now that we had some time in between and that we had time to sort things off, I would have some kind of expectation as the director of the NFDI that additional effort is put into these next steps and say, okay, let's revisit our studies, let's revisit our research data, put some effort there and make them available to a larger body of researchers. I think this is especially important if we want to address this question, Iris, that you also addressed, how to prepare, and you also, Stephan, how to prepare better for the next pandemic. We need to understand what exactly happened during the last year. And for that, reproducibility of studies is key, I would say. So locking down the research data will not help us. It will rather prevent from identifying how can we improve the whole system. So coming back to my questions, given this whole situation, do you see future chances, maybe also for NFDI, to do the right stitches and twitches so that we get more of this data?
So there was the first hand raising from Stephan Liebig, but I think it's an interesting question to both of you. So maybe please, Stephan Liebig, you are first, and then Iris Pigeot is second.
I wanted to add to Iris Pigeot, because, I mean, sometimes we are speaking of the chances of the pandemic, and maybe the pandemic now offers now a chance in doing what we are trying on both sides, so to say, on the social science on the one hand and health science and these research on the other hand, that we should what we are trying for some time, for some years, to come together and to exchange our measure instruments and to assure that we really have data which we can use and which are covering a broader area. And so maybe this is a time really to speak about exchanging measurement instruments and secure or working together to get really linkable data and build up something like such an infrastructure. And your question, Jörg, I think, I mean, our project aims to offer something, to offer single researchers a kind of visibility, yeah, and to so that their data are seen and their data are used. And this is one incentive we can think about, yeah. And I mean, we know that, but this is one objective of this project to improve data sharing by making things visible. And the other point is, yeah, how can we look forward, and how can we be prepared for another event is really to establish structures and establish networks over different disciplines. And yeah, so these.
Perhaps to just go on with the answer to Jörg's questions. Of course, I agree to everything that Stephan said, but what I also noticed is that COVID-19, I mean, it was a disaster, no question, but it helped to make clear that there is an urgent need for an infrastructure. And it was partly, I was asked for interviews regarding NFDI, and then I mentioned COVID-19 as an example, and then people understood. And that was good. That was a very good experience. But on the other hand, I also noticed that when I asked people to provide their study instruments, their metadata, and so on, some of them said, oh, we did a very fast study. It is not good, but it helped us to get an idea how it looks like. And therefore, I think they also said, you can get all my data, but they are not so good. And they have been a little bit afraid of that. And Jörg, just to answer your question regarding reproducibility and whether they would like to make the data fair, I think most of them would not have enough money for that, and also not competence. I think what we really need is that we have enough data stewards at the different places that help people to set up research data management in a reasonable manner, that supports them later to really clean the data, to make them accessible. And you know, a lot of those studies that we have collected have been conducted in hospitals, and they did it just on the fly, and they just collected data. And there was no research data management behind, they just collected them. And they need help, because you can't expect that actually a nurse on the intense unit of COVID-19, that this nurse is not also responsible for research data management. I mean, it's ridiculous. It won't work. They need staff. They need staff that is educated in this area. And there has been another question in the chat, and perhaps I can pick it up because it was related to the fact whether there is an overlap. And I saw that Juliana already answered. Yes, there is an overlap between the studies. I give you just an example. For instance, the study SHARE is a study that relates to a lot of socioeconomic questions in the elderly. But now they added questions to the health status of these elderly, and then it was attractive for us. And a lot of these studies that have been already collected by the German, that have been already conducted by the German Data Forum, were then conducted by us. Hi, would you like to also join our register? We are already involved in that register. And it said, it doesn't matter. Then you are registered twice. And of course they did it, but that was also the reason why we got to know from each other, and we thought that it is great to put things together. I hope that's answered partly your question, Jörg.
This is also great to see how these connections also derive from this extra project and this extra use case. Barbara Ebert had another question. She posted it in the chat. If you compared the project studies between the two projects, would there be overlaps? Maybe there was also a short answer in the chat, but maybe you also have some ideas or hints how you could identify this.
I mean, that was what I mentioned before. We noticed that we have the same studies, but we also partly have the same aims. I mean, the idea of harmonization is in both minds. We need to have the same questions to make data interoperable that are collected. And what I mean, I have a dream. I have a dream that I have a kind of template how to conduct a study in the social and in the health field. And as soon as we have the next outbreak, and I hope I am then no longer living, but it might be that it will happen next year or in 2 or 3 years, we don't know. But then there is a template, and people know there is a template, there is the infrastructure, they can just pick it and use it for their study. And then all over Germany, all the people use the same study protocol, they use the same questionnaires, and then we can do meta-analysis, we can combine the data. And that would be fantastic. They use the template for linking the data, and we get an overall picture of high quality data. And isn't that a dream? And I mean, the NFDI now helps to get the infrastructure built. And perhaps in 3 to 4 years, it really looks different here. But what Jörg also mentioned, or Stephan mentioned it, I mean, there have been studies in the past that have been conducted related to COVID-19. They were really bad. And they also published wrong results. And that was partly really a disaster because they gave the wrong recommendations. And that is something that I don't know how this can be prevented in this future, because we urgently needed results. And then a lot of things happened. And some of these studies that were published were really of bad shape. And that partly also led to really seriously wrong recommendations or hints.
Okay, thank you for elaborating more on this. Jörg has another question, and I also see Barbara posted another question, but maybe your question first, and then I will read out Barbara's question.
Thank you. Yes, you answered my question, by the way. If I hear your dream now, and if I hear the urgency for such a tool, I was wondering, is this something which is only related to pandemic situations? And probably the answer is no. That is the question you answered. Second question is it really so difficult to build such a thing? And the answer probably is yes. However, we do see bits and pieces which are out there. And I'm not sure if we already have ein Hebel, der lang genug ist. How to say that in English? I don't know if our stick is long enough already to put enough power into building such tools, because the ingredients are exchangeable metadata, which is what we have. Metadata standards for questionnaires. This is what we have. Of course, we have privacy concerns when collecting the data. This is one of the serious issues there. But also the question is the tool needs to be user-friendly enough so that even nurses, for example, can use it in an environment where WLAN maybe is not available everywhere, or Wi-Fi. So you need you need to understand how it really works at the place where you want to collect the data. in a way so that you can still collect and connect these data all together. So boiling this down to a question is, what is the next big innovation that we need to make this dream a reality?
I'm not sure which innovation we need, but I think, I mean, also in the chat, there were some votes saying that we need more resources. And this is, I think, the point that we, and what we need is, we need an example or a study which we can show what we can do or the potentials of these things, and not only the potentials for in case of scientific research, but also what we can provide the politics and also the to the public, and how we can answer central questions. And if we have such a best practice thing or example showing exactly this and why this is relevant, I think this would be, according to my view, the first step to make this thing more broader and more visible, I think. But maybe Andres Saravia, who is part of the project, maybe he has an idea of the innovation. Sorry, Andres, that I just ask you, but maybe, I mean, he is also part of the project, and he's responsible for all what we are doing. So Andres, do you have an idea of innovation we need?
Yeah, that's of course not such an easy question, but I think it's important just with events like this here that we can also first get to know about these different projects which have so much in common. So we started, for example, inside the consortia. For example, we started just to work together, for example, with another measure which works on harmonizing survey items. So, for example, we could use this kind of cooperation also to share expertise and maybe also share technical innovation. So I think, interlinking across disciplines or within the consortia is a very good first step to go for this.
Okay, thank you. There's a raised hand by from Iris Pigeot. And before I hand over to you, there's also a small question for clarification. If you could just also explain once more if your databases are connected to each other, just as a question of clarification. And there's also another chance for a short question from somebody else. So please feel free to ask a question again. So Iris Pigeot.
Yeah, just perhaps the question by Jörg for the next steps. I think what is really important is that funding agency, really appreciate that research data management takes time and money. That means if you are, for instance, if you want to conduct an empirical study and you have only 2 years, and then they would like to already see the publications, that is not feasible. That means we should appreciate that it is really needed to have time to set up a research data management plan, to set up the research data management, to clean the data carefully, and to work on the verification of the data. But that has to be paid. It is no free lunch. And I think that is one of the major problems that we are currently facing. And the other thing regarding the 2 databases, they cannot be linked currently, but of course we could work on that this is possible. Perhaps Juliane wanted to also answer this question, and therefore I stop here because she's the responsible person at the ZBMID and knows much better than I do.
Great,
Yeah.
so please go on.
And to answer the question with the links, so we have agreed on that we set links for in the first step on our website, that we link to the other databases. If you're looking for health studies, that the link is going to our studies, and social study vice versa. I think the next step would be really that the link on the single study would also be on to get interlinked in between. That would be possible. Then I would also answer to the comment with Silke Schneider with these harmonized data set. Did you also contact the medical informatics with these harmonized data set? Because I would say there an exchange would also make sense, at least for some common data sets. What we also have seen from our comparison, that these two domains should also merge before we get to recommendation, but because it makes no sense if you have other recommendation in the medical area for Stammdaten or something like that, and other ones in the social area. So that's something I like very much on this pandemic, that we really got together very early and see these problems and can work together.
Okay, thank you for explaining. And is this another raised hand or clapping?
Actually, I made a mistake. Sorry for that. I just wanted to raise my hand. What we noticed from our project is from the COVID-19 task force was that it is a kind of actually of a guinea pig of the NFDI for health. And we really see also that it will be a huge endeavor to get an infrastructure that really fits all the different types of studies, and that we get always harmonized variables and so on. I think it will really take a lot of time to get things changed. And now with COVID-19, we have a kind of rush because we have to be very fast, but we learn a lot. And we also, to be honest, we also make mistakes, but that helps to not repeat the mistakes, hopefully, in course of the NFDI for health. Perhaps we then have the chance to find other opportunities to make mistakes, and I'm pretty sure we will find them. But I think for us, it was a great experience to see how it worked with COVID-19, and it made us also a little bit, partly it motivated us because we saw how many people reacted in a positive way. But we also saw all the problems that we are now facing with the overall consortium.
Okay, thank you so much. We are now coming to the end of this month's talk. It was again very interesting to see examples from two different fields of research. For those who are on the mailing list or who are attending the Zoom session, you can find the NFDI InfraTalk session posted in the chat, or it was also posted in the mailing list in the invitation for this talk. As always, please feel free to come to our after talk to have a small chat on today's talk or on other topics as well. It's just a great opportunity for meeting colleagues also on the side, as we to just have also this digital opportunity and for chatting, as you usually do after a talk. So please feel invited, and I will be happy to welcome you here. And of course, to our next InfraTalk on 5th of July. On persistent identifiers and the PID graph for NFDI, contribution from NFDI for Inc.
And I'd like to make one more comment on the next talk. This has a link to today's talks, because what you do, Iris, is to put PIDs on items and further things. And with the PID graph, you can connect such PIDs to a larger structure. and then conduct analysis on that graph. And that is actually quite interesting. So we are really looking forward to this next talk. And we cannot close this session before we have thanked our team for again setting up a very nice InfraTalk. Our team mostly remains invisible, but they have the large portion of the work to do. So thank you very much for organizing and for doing all the great work that you do. See you at the WonderMe.